Part 1 The Collision. The smell of lemon disinfectant was the only constant in Elias Washington's life. It clung to his worn denim, permeated the rubber soles of his boots, and settled in the quiet spaces of his day. He worked with a steady, rhythmic grace, his mop gliding across the gleaming marble floor of the Vance Innovations Tower lobby. The motion was a form of meditation, a physical prayer against the chaos of the world. His tools were old but immaculate. The wooden handle of his mop was smooth from years of use, the metal of his bucket polished, not with pride, but with the simple dignity of a man who cared for what was his. Beside his cart, sitting on an upturned bucket, was the entire reason for his existence. Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, was coloring. A last-minute cancellation from the sitter had left him with no choice. She was a quiet child, her small world contained within the lines of her coloring book and the rainbow of crayons spread on the lid of a cardboard box. Her presence transformed the sterile, hollow space into something sacred. The glass doors of the tower hissed open, shattering the stillness. Katerina Vance swept into the lobby like a winter storm. Her presence seemed to drop the temperature by 10 degrees. Dressed in a sharply tailored charcoal suit, she was the human embodiment of the steel and glass that surrounded them. Her face was a mask of unflinching control. She didn't walk, she carved a path through the air. "Marcus," she said, her voice a splinter of ice. She didn't look at the man scurrying to keep pace with her. "The Sato proposal. The projections are soft. The Tokyo delegation arrives in an hour, and you're handing me weakness. Ms. Vance, the data is—" Marcus Thorne began, fumbling with a leather-bound folio. "The data is an excuse." Katerina cut him off, her voice dangerously low. "Fix it. Or I'll find someone who can." She stopped dead center in the lobby, her gaze fixed on the upper mezzanine, her mind already in a boardroom 3 time zones away. Marcus, flustered, lost his grip on the folio. It slapped against the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. Lily flinched, a crayon skittering across the floor. Her lower lip began to tremble. Her big, dark eyes welled with tears, a silent, sudden storm. The sharp sound, the icy tension in the air, it was too much. A small, choked sob escaped her. Elias was there in an instant. He didn't speak. He simply knelt, turning his body to shield her from the 2 figures frozen in the center of the lobby. His large, callous hands that wrestled with overflowing bins and stubborn scuff marks, became instruments of impossible gentleness. He ignored the escaped crayon. Instead, he met his daughter's eyes, his own full of an unwavering calm. He began to hum. It was a low, soft tune, a melody that felt ancient and deeply sad, yet comforting. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, a voice meant only for her, he began to speak. The words were not English. They were fluid, gentle, syllables of pure sound and solace. "Daijobu, Chisana Hikari," he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "It's all right, little light. Kawai odo dake." Just a scary noise. The Japanese words were like a soft blanket. Lily's sobs hitched, then quieted. She leaned her forehead against his shoulder, her small body relaxing into his. He continued to murmur, his voice a quiet river washing away her fear. From the mezzanine above, Katerina Vance had witnessed the entire exchange. She had been about to descend, to tear into Marcus further, but she had stopped, hidden by the angle and the smoked glass. She saw the folio fall. She saw the child's terror. And then she saw the janitor's response. It wasn't the kneeling or the comfort that made her breath catch in her throat. It was the language. It was the pitch-perfect, native-sounding accent. It was the profound, intuitive empathy of his solution. He hadn't just calmed a child. He had performed a subtle act of emotional alchemy. He had met a crisis of feeling with a tool she had never conceived of using, grace. Her own multi-million-dollar team of translators and cultural advisors were, at that very moment, failing to bridge the gap with the Sato Corporation. They were experts in grammar and syntax. This man, this janitor, understood the soul of the language. She felt a crack form in the ice of her composure. It was a terrifying, unfamiliar sensation. She descended the stairs, her heels clicking with their usual authority, but her mind was in turmoil. Marcus retrieved his folio, his face a mask of humiliation. Elias was still kneeling, his back to her, focused solely on his daughter. Katerina stopped a few feet away. Elias eventually sensed her presence and rose slowly, turning to face her. His expression was neutral, guarded. "The meeting with Mr. Sato," Katerina said, her voice stripped of its earlier ice, leaving something raw and uncertain. "My interpreters are failing." "You!" She trailed off, studying his face. Elias's gaze was steady. He said nothing. "I need you in that boardroom," Katerina stated. It wasn't a question. "For 1 hour." He glanced down at Lily, who was now calmly drawing a yellow sun on a fresh page. He looked at Katerina's expensive, powerful, and suddenly fragile world. He had built his life around avoiding rooms like the one she was commanding him into. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I have a job to do." Katerina took a step closer. For the first time, she truly saw him, the quiet weariness in his eyes, the immense strength in his posture. "You're not what I expected," she said, a probe into the mystery he presented. He simply nodded, accepting the statement as fact. He had no interest in her expectations. His only concern was the small, precious world coloring peacefully on an upturned bucket. He was about to refuse again when he saw the scuffed toes of Lily's sneakers. He saw the life he was giving her, safe, loving, but limited. This woman was offering something else. Not for him. For Lily. 1 hour, Elias said, the words costing him more than she could ever know. Part 2, Proximity. The Vance Innovations boardroom was on the 44th floor, a sterile sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was a room designed to intimidate, to reinforce the power of the woman who sat at its head. Elias, now wearing a borrowed blazer that was slightly too tight across the shoulders, felt like a ghost haunting a world he had long since abandoned. He stood not at the table, but slightly behind and to the side of Katerina's chair, a position of service he was accustomed to, yet one that was now charged with an entirely different meaning. Marcus Thorne, his face still flushed with humiliation, shot Elias a look of pure contempt. "Ms. Vance, this is highly irregular. His credentials are that he is in this room and you are not," Katerina said without looking at Marcus, who was dismissed to a chair against the wall, outside the circle of power. The Japanese delegation, led by the venerable Mr. Sato, entered. They were formal, polite, and radiated an impenetrable calm that had been confounding Katerina's team for weeks. Her lead interpreter, a man with a Ph.D. from Stanford, began the pleasantries. The response from Mr. Sato was brief. The Stanford interpreter turned to Katerina. "Mr. Sato expresses his gratitude for the hospitality." Elias detected the subtle dissonance instantly. It wasn't just what Mr. Sato said, but the kigo, the honorifics he used, the formality level, the subtle sigh that preceded his words. The translation was technically correct but emotionally tone-deaf. It was like describing a Monet as a painting with colors. Katerina sensed it, too. The air was still cold. She gave Elias the slightest of nods. When the next exchange happened, Elias stepped forward. He listened intently, his head bowed in a sign of respect. Then, he turned to Katerina. "Mr. Sato acknowledges the revised proposal," Elias began, his voice calm and clear. "He also communicates a deep concern that the core philosophy of our companies remains misaligned. He uses a phrase, onaji yomo miru, which means to see the same dream. He feels we are not yet seeing the same dream. He is concerned our focus on Q4 projections ignores the century of tradition his company is built on." He is speaking not as a CEO, but as a steward of his grandfather's legacy. The room went silent. The Stanford interpreter stared aghast. Marcus Thorne's jaw tightened. Katerina looked at Mr. Sato, who was now looking at Elias with a flicker of genuine interest. For the first time, the old man felt heard. For the next hour, Elias was not a janitor. He was a bridge. He didn't just translate words, he translated meaning, intent, and respect. He navigated the treacherous currents of honorifics and cultural nuance, explaining to Katerina that a non-committal we will consider it was a polite but firm no, and that Mr. Sato's comment about the cherry blossoms outside the window was not small talk, but a metaphor for the fleeting nature of opportunity. As he worked, his quiet competence filled the room. During a short break, he noticed the projector screen was flickering almost imperceptibly. While the executives refilled their water, he discreetly checked the connection, tightening a loose cable he had noticed earlier that week while cleaning. The flicker vanished. Katerina saw it. When the meeting concluded, the atmosphere had transformed. Mr. Sato stood and gave a slight bow, first to Katerina, and then a deeper, more respectful one to Elias. "Anata wa kokoro de kikamasu," he said directly to Elias. "You listen with the heart." After the delegation left, the room buzzed with relief. Katerina stood alone by the window, watching the elevators descend. "The board has approved a bonus for your role in this," she said, her back still to him. "I was just doing a job, ma'am," Elias replied, already shrugging off the borrowed blazer. "No," she said, turning to face him. Her eyes, for the first time, held no ice. Just a deep, unsettling curiosity. "You were doing much more than that." She saw the man who had calmed her storm, fixed her projector, and saved her deal, all with the same quiet, unassuming dignity. And she knew her world had been irrevocably altered. Part 3, The Glimpse. Katerina created a new position for Elias. Special Consultant for Intercultural Affairs. It was a vague title for a role she was defining day by day. In reality, she wanted to keep him close, to understand the quiet power he wielded. He was given a small, Spartan office, a world away from her glass-walled penthouse suite. He spent his days reviewing communications, smoothing over cultural misunderstandings with international partners, and bringing a sense of calm to the frantic energy of the 44th floor. He always left at 4:45 p.m., on the dot to pick up Lily from her new after-school program. His devotion was as reliable as the tides. One evening, a sudden downpour turned the city into a blur of neon and rain. Katerina was working late, wrestling with a hostile takeover bid from a rival firm. The pressure was immense, the kind that reminded her of her father's relentless demands. Exhausted, she decided to walk the floor, the silence of the empty office usually a comfort. As she passed Elias's small office, she heard it. A sound so unexpected, so out of place in the sterile corporate environment, that she froze. It was music. Piano music. A melody that was achingly beautiful, complex, and full of a profound, unresolved sorrow. It was the sound of a soul speaking. The door was ajar. Peeking through the crack, Katerina saw Elias sitting at a small electronic keyboard she hadn't even known was in the office. He must have brought it from home. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. His fingers, which she had only known to hold a mop handle or a pen, moved over the keys with a fluidity and grace that was breathtaking. This wasn't a hobby. This was mastery. The music was a confession, a story of love and loss told in a language more universal than any he had spoken in the boardroom. Katerina felt like an intruder, witnessing something intensely private. The music was a glimpse into the vast, hidden country of his past. The janitor, the interpreter, they were just roles he played. This, the man at the piano, was who he was. The quiet grief she had sensed in him now had a voice, a heartbreakingly beautiful one. She backed away slowly, her heart pounding. She returned to her silent, penthouse office and stood at the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. The city lights below seemed distant and cold. The power, the status, the wealth, it all felt hollow compared to the authentic, soulful beauty she had just witnessed. The next day, she said nothing about the piano. But the way she looked at him had changed. The respect she felt had deepened into something closer to awe. She was no longer just intrigued by his skills, she was drawn to the man himself, to the depths he kept so carefully hidden. She found herself manufacturing reasons to speak with him, asking his opinion on matters far outside his official duties. "What do you think of the new logo proposal?" she asked one afternoon, holding up 2 designs. He studied them for a moment. "This one," he said, pointing to the simpler design. "It's honest. The other one is trying too hard to be something it's not." His observation landed with the weight of a profound truth, and she knew he wasn't just talking about logos. Part 4, The Bridge. A Saturday charity gala, one Katerina was obligated to attend and sponsor, included a family fun day component. On a whim, driven by a new and unfamiliar impulse, she had her assistant extend an invitation to Elias and Lily. To her surprise, he accepted. Seeing them there, away from the sterile confines of the office, was another dislocation. Elias was in a simple polo shirt and jeans, his focus entirely on Lily, who was trying to win a stuffed animal at a ring toss game. He was just a father. A happy, attentive father. Katerina approached them, feeling awkward and out of place in her casual but exorbitantly expensive silk blouse. "Ms. Vance," Elias said, a small, polite smile on his face. "Katerina," she corrected him gently. "We're not at the office." Before he could respond, Lily looked up at her, her eyes wide and perceptive. She held up a piece of paper. It was a drawing, done in bright, bold crayon. It was a portrait of a stick figure with sharp, dark hair and a dress, standing in a tall, gray box with windows. The figure wasn't smiling. "This is you," Lily said, her voice clear and direct. Katerina looked at the drawing. It was a child's simple rendering, yet it was devastatingly accurate. The lonely queen in her glass tower. "She looks lonely," Lily added, not as a judgment, but as an observation. She then took a purple crayon from her pocket, and, with intense concentration, drew a small, hesitant smile on the stick figure's face. "There. That's better." She held the drawing out to Katerina. "A gift." Katerina accepted the piece of paper as if it were a priceless artifact. Her throat felt tight. In all her life, no one had ever offered her such a simple, profound, and unvarnished truth. People gave her flattery, proposals, demands. This child had given her a piece of her own soul, seen through the clear eyes of innocence. "You have sad eyes," Lily said, her gaze unwavering. "But the purple smile helps." It was a truth bomb that shattered Katerina's carefully constructed defenses. She knelt, so she was at eye level with the child. "Thank you, Lily," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen." Elias watched the exchange, a complex expression on his face. He saw the crack in Katerina's armor widen into a fissure. He saw the powerful CO become a woman, vulnerable and seen. Later, as they were leaving, Katerina walked with them to their car. The easy, loving rapport between father and daughter was a world away from her own sterile childhood, where affection was a reward for achievement. "She's remarkable," Katerina said quietly to Elias. "She's her mother's daughter," he replied, the words full of a quiet, enduring love. Katerina understood then that this small family unit, built on a foundation of profound loss and unwavering love, possessed a wealth she had never known how to acquire. The drawing was clutched in her hand. It was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a bridge. A bridge from her world to theirs. And for the first time in her life, she wanted to cross it. Part 5, The Vulnerability Exchange. The hostile takeover attempt intensified. Late nights became the norm. Katerina and a skeleton crew, including Elias, worked from a secure suite, papers and coffee cups cluttering the polished surfaces. One night, after the rest of the team had gone, only Katerina and Elias remained. The city was a glittering tapestry below them, silent and distant. The only sounds were the hum of the building and the soft ticking of a wall clock. Katerina was staring at a photo on her desk, a stiff, formal portrait of her and her father, taken years ago. Her expression in the photo was the same one she wore now, controlled, impenetrable. "He never told me he was proud of me," she said, her voice so quiet it was almost swallowed by the silence. "Not once." When I took over the company, he sent a one-word telegram: proceed. Elias stopped his work, turning his full attention to her. He didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. He simply listened, creating a safe space for the confession to land. Everything I built, she continued, gesturing to the city below. This tower, this empire, it was all to get him to see me. To prove that I was worthy of more than just a nod of approval. But he passed away 2 years ago. And I'm still building. Her voice broke on the last word. A single, hot tear traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily, as if it were a betrayal. A long, comfortable silence settled between them. Elias didn't rush to fill it. He let her vulnerability breathe in the air. Finally, he spoke, his own voice low and resonant with memory. My wife, Sarah, she was a botanist, he began. She's the one who loved Japan. She dragged me to a language class. I had no talent for it at first. She was fluent in a year. He smiled, a genuine, sad smile. She saw things others missed. The way a leaf unfurled, the specific shade of a sunset. She would have liked you. She would have said you just need more sunlight. He looked out the window. We were saving for a trip to Kyoto. We had a jar. Lily would put her pennies in it. The night before we were going to buy the tickets, there was a drunk driver. The police said she never saw him coming. He paused, the weight of the memory filling the space between them. When she was gone, the world went silent. The music stopped. The language, it felt like it belonged to her. For a long time, I couldn't speak it. I couldn't touch a piano. All that mattered was Lily. My career, the travel, the prestige, it was just noise. I chose quiet. I chose her. Katerina listened, her own pain receding in the face of his. She finally understood the source of his quiet dignity, the deep well of sadness that his music had revealed. He wasn't hiding from the world, he was protecting the most important part of it. His exile was a choice. An act of love. She reached across the space between them, her hand tentatively resting on his forearm. It was the first time she had initiated contact. The touch was electric, a current of shared grief and understanding passing between them. I'm scared, she admitted, a confession that felt more intimate than any other she had ever made. She wasn't talking about the takeover. She was talking about the empty fortress she had built around her heart. I know, he said softly. In that quiet, shared moment, high above the sleeping city, the CEO and the consultant ceased to exist. They were just a man and a woman, their wounds exposed, their souls finally meeting in the vast, quiet space of their shared humanity. They had exchanged the stories of how they had broken. And in doing so, they had begun to heal. Part 6. The external threat. The battle for Vance Innovations reached its tipping point. Katerina, bolstered by a newfound sense of purpose, fought back with a brilliance and ferocity that surprised even her oldest colleagues. Elias was her constant shadow, her strategic sounding board, his calm a vital anchor in the storm. Their partnership, once a curiosity on the 44th floor, was now a subject of whispers and resentment, especially from Marcus Thorne. Furious at being sidelined and watching a man he considered his subordinate become Katerina's most trusted advisor, Marcus decided to attack where Katerina was most vulnerable, her connection to Elias. He couldn't challenge Elias's competence. The success of the Sato deal was undeniable. So he chose to attack his character, using the most vicious weapon he could find. One afternoon, Elias received a phone call while at his desk. Katerina, walking by, saw the color drain from his face. His posture, always so strong, seemed to collapse inward. He hung up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. Elias? What is it? She asked, her voice sharp with concern. Child Protective Services, he said, the words barely audible. They received an anonymous complaint. Neglect. They're opening an investigation. Pierre left the room. It was a calculated, brutal strike. The complaint would allege that a single father was forcing his young daughter to wait for him in unsafe conditions, that his new, demanding job was causing him to neglect her fundamental needs. It was a lie, but a lie designed to create a public, messy scandal that would taint not just Elias, but Katerina and the company by association. The threat was primal. It wasn't about contracts or stock prices. It was about Elias's fitness as a father, the very foundation of his identity. His carefully constructed world, built to protect Lily, was under siege. That evening, the first drops of a cold rain began to fall, streaking the glass of Katerina's office. The storm outside mirrored the one that had just broken over their lives. The company's board of directors, already skittish from the takeover bid, convened an emergency meeting. The message from the chairman was clear and cold: distance the company from this. Cut Elias loose. Protect the brand at all costs. Katerina stood before them, the choice laid bare. On one side was the world she had built, the power she had fought for, the approval of the men who sat in judgment. On the other was Elias and his daughter, the quiet man who had shown her what true strength was, and the little girl who had given her a drawing of a smile. It wasn't a choice. Not anymore. No, Katerina said, her voice ringing with an authority that had nothing to do with her title. The complaint is a lie, and we will not capitulate to slander. Elias Washington has more integrity in his little finger than this entire board has combined. An attack on him is an attack on me, and on the character of this company. We will not cut him loose. We will fight. She was no longer the queen in the glass tower, protecting her isolation. She was a queen defending her own. Part 7, The Alliance. Katerina's declaration of war against the anonymous threat was swift and absolute. She left the boardroom, leaving a stunned and divided board behind her. Her first call was not to her PR team, but to the most formidable family law attorney in the state. Her instructions were simple. Spare no expense. Crush this. She found Elias in his small office, packing a cardboard box with the few personal items he kept there: the small keyboard, a framed photo of Sarah, Lily's drawing of the smiling stick figure. He was retreating, preparing to sacrifice himself to protect her and the company. What are you doing? Katerina asked, her voice soft but firm. They're right, he said, not looking at her. His voice was hollow. This is my world, not yours. I can't let them drag you and Lily into it. You're not, she said, walking over and placing her hand on his, stopping him from packing. We are in this. Together. He finally looked up, and she saw the raw fear and pain in his eyes. It was the look of a man terrified of losing the only thing that mattered. I'm not a charity case, Katerina, he said, his voice laced with a quiet, wounded pride. I have never, for 1 second, thought you were, she countered, her gaze intense and unwavering. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who take. They take credit, they take power, they take advantage. You are the first person I have met who only knows how to give. You give comfort, you give wisdom, you give strength. Now you will let me give you my support. Not as your boss, but as your ally. The word felt insufficient, but it was the only one she could offer. She told him about the lawyer. She told him about her confrontation with the board. She laid out her strategy, not just to defend against the CPS claim, but to uncover its source. Her mind, so adept at corporate warfare, was now focused on a single, personal objective. He listened, the tension slowly leaving his shoulders. He saw the fire in her eyes, the absolute conviction. She was not saving him. She was standing with him. She was choosing his world over the one that had defined her for so long. I hired a private investigator, she said, her tone all business. The complaint was anonymous, but nothing is ever truly untraceable. We're going to find out who did this. Her eyes narrowed. My money is on Marcus Thorne. Elias nodded slowly, absorbing the reality of her commitment. He was no longer alone in this fight. The wall he had built around himself and Lily had been breached, not by an enemy, but by an army of one who had come to stand guard alongside him. Okay, he whispered. The word was a surrender, an acceptance of her help. It was an act of trust. Okay, she replied, her hands still covering his. In that moment, they were no longer a CEO and a consultant. They were a team. A unified front against the storm. And their alliance, forged in vulnerability and solidified in crisis, was more powerful than any corporate entity. Part 8. The Public Vindication. The climax arrived not in a courtroom, but at the annual Vance Innovations Global Summit, a massive event designed to showcase the company's strength and future. It was the perfect stage for the final act of the hostile takeover drama and Marcus Thorne's insidious campaign. The press, international partners, and the entire corporate world were watching. The private investigator's report had landed on Katerina's desk that morning. It was damning. Digital breadcrumbs, a burner phone purchased with cash, a call made from a cell tower near Marcus's apartment, all pointed directly to him. Katerina took the stage, a vision of calm, collected power. But this time, it was different. It wasn't the cold, sterile power of her past. It was warm, alive, and fiercely human. She began by speaking of the company's recent challenges, the takeover bid, the internal pressures. Then her tone shifted. A company is not a stock price or a building, she said, her voice resonating through the auditorium. It is a collection of people. Its character is defined not in times of ease, but in moments of trial. And in the past few weeks, we have been tried. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes eventually landing on Marcus Thorne, who was sitting in the front row, a smug look on his face. We have been tried by those who believe power is a tool for personal gain, and that integrity is a weakness to be exploited. An attack was made not on our business, but on the character of a good man, a member of our team. An anonymous, cowardly, and false complaint was filed with Child Protective Services against Elias Washington. A gasp rippled through the audience. Elias stood in the wings of the stage, his heart pounding. This attack was designed to destabilize this company and to personally destroy a man whose only crime was his quiet excellence. Katerina continued, her voice rising with controlled fury. But what our enemies fail to understand is that character is not so easily broken. And truth has a way of finding the light. She gestured to the wings. I want to introduce you to the man I am proud to call my partner and my friend. Elias Washington. Elias walked onto the stage. He did not look like a victim. He looked like what he was, a man of immense dignity. He stood beside Katerina, a silent testament to her words. The investigation was closed this morning, Katerina announced, her voice clear as a bell. The claims were found to be, and I quote, wholly without merit. Furthermore, the source of this malicious complaint has been identified. She paused, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. She didn't need to name Marcus. Every eye in the room had already turned to him. His face had gone ashen. Just then, Mr. Sato, who had flown in for the summit, stood up from his seat in the front row. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked up at Elias. In perfect English, he spoke into a nearby microphone. The character of a man is the bedrock of any worthy enterprise, Mr. Sato said, his voice full of authority. I chose to partner with Vance Innovations not because of its projections, but because of the heart of this man, who showed us that listening is more powerful than speaking. The public vindication was absolute. Marcus Thorne, exposed and humiliated, practically fled the auditorium. The applause that followed was deafening. On stage, under the bright lights, Katerina turned to Elias. In front of the entire world, she reached out and took his hand. Their fingers interlaced. It was not a corporate gesture. It was a public declaration of their unity, a solidifying of their bond for all to see. They were a team. A family. And they had won. Part 9, The Resolution. The summit ended in a triumph. The hostile takeover bid collapsed, its backers retreating in the face of Katerina's revitalized leadership and the resounding endorsement from Sato Corporation. Marcus Thorne was fired, escorted from the building with a quiet, ignominious finality. Later that evening, the noise and chaos faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the tower. Katerina and Elias found themselves on the rooftop garden, a hidden sanctuary she had built years ago but had rarely visited. The city lights spread out below them, no longer a cold, distant tapestry, but a beautiful, vibrant world they were now a part of together. The air was cool and clean. The scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine replaced the sterile scent of the office. "Thank you," Elias said, his voice full of an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "For believing in me." "How could I not?" Katerina replied softly. She looked at him, at the steady calm in his eyes, a calm that had become her anchor. "You showed me what strength really is. It's not about building walls. It's about having the courage to let them down." She stepped closer, the space between them disappearing. "All my life, I thought love was a transaction. A reward for success. You and Lily, you showed me it's a gift." He lifted his hand, his fingers gently tracing her jawline. The touch was no longer tentative or uncertain. It was sure, tender, and full of everything they had been through. "Katerina," he said, his voice a low whisper. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. All the armor, all the ice, all the years of lonely striving, melted away under the warmth of his hand. When he leaned in and kissed her, it was not a kiss of passion or frantic energy. It was a kiss of arrival. It was quiet, deep, and peaceful. It tasted of resolution, of coming home. When they parted, they rested their foreheads together, breathing the same air. The turmoil was over. The fight was won. What was left was a profound, unshakable peace. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now," he said, his lips brushing against hers as he spoke. "We see what grows." For the first time, she felt truly seen. And for the first time, he felt truly safe to be himself. The resolution was not an ending, but the beginning of a quiet, beautiful, and deeply earned new life. Part 10, The New Beginning. 1 year later. The sunlight streamed through the large bay window of a warm, cluttered, and happy home. It was not a sterile penthouse, but a beautiful brownstone with overflowing bookshelves and the faint, lingering scent of cinnamon. On the living room floor, Lily, now 8, was teaching Katerina the chords to a song on a small acoustic guitar. Katerina's fingers were clumsy on the frets, and her laughter was frequent and genuine. Elias watched them from the doorway, a mug of coffee in his hand, a look of pure, peaceful contentment on his face. The worn denim was gone, replaced by a comfortable sweater. He was no longer a man in exile. He was home. Their new reality was a blend of their old worlds. Katerina still ran Vance Innovations, but its culture had been transformed. The 44th floor now had a subsidized daycare, flexible work hours, and a new ethos centered on employee well-being. Elias served as the head of the company's new philanthropic arm, a position that utilized his empathy and strategic mind in equal measure. Their shared mission was taking shape in the form of their first major project, showcased in a framed architectural rendering on the mantel. It was the Sarah Washington Center for Cultural Exchange, a foundation dedicated to fostering understanding and empathy through language and the arts. It would offer scholarships, host international artists, and have a special program for at-risk youth, teaching them music as a therapeutic outlet. It was a legacy of love, built from the ashes of their individual pain. Later that afternoon, Katerina and Elias stood in the backyard, a burgeoning garden blooming around them. She leaned her head against his shoulder as they watched Lily chase a butterfly across the grass. "You know," Katerina said softly, "my father was wrong. Power isn't about control." Elias wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "What is it about, then?" She turned her face up to his, her eyes clear and full of love. "It's about having a place to plant your roots. It's about having someone to share the sunlight with." He kissed her, a quiet affirmation of their shared truth. Their pasts had not been erased, but integrated, transformed into the strong foundation upon which they were building their future. Their scars had become a map that led them to each other, and their journey from isolation to connection was complete. Love, they had learned, was not about being perfect, it was about being present. And true purpose was found not in what you built for yourself, but in what you gave to others. Where are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support allows us to keep creating content that celebrates the quiet heroes and the power of human connection. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop listening with your heart.